I'm Alex. I'm a product marketer by trade as well, but today hopefully going to represent the audience for this group. But want to start with some introductions. So from the panel, maybe quick who you are, your role, maybe where you live. Maybe I'll start with Chandra.
Yes, had to find that pesky mute button. Hi, I'm Chandra Patel. I work at Salesforce. I'm a senior director of product marketing in the Sales Cloud business, and I've done a bunch of different roles on this team and kind of have a long career in product marketing. So I'm always excited to share my knowledge. I am based in San Francisco, and for those of you that are familiar with the Bay Area, I'm sitting in the Salesforce Tower right now.
Salesforce Tower is beautiful. It's always fun to walk around the park. All right. How about Morgan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan, and I lead product and lifecycle marketing at SurveyMonkey. I am also in the Bay Area. I live down in Redwood City, working from my home office today. And I've been in product marketing for about 7 years, but I previous to that was a researcher. So researcher turned marketer. And so that brings an interesting perspective, of course, to product marketing.
Mike?
Last. Hi, everybody. Mike Polner. Most recently, I've been the VP and head of marketing at Discord. And then prior to that, I built and was the global head of product marketing at Uber Eats for a little bit. So product marketing at the heart. I love it. So excited to chat with y'all.
Very cool. And Mike, are you in the Bay Area as well?
I am. I'm in a rainy kind of San Francisco actually right now. So not really getting the sunshine, but yeah.
That's okay. San Francisco is so beautiful. I'm in Chicago, so representing the Midwest here in this chat. But let's dive in. So I have a first question for the group, and love to hear about how you all create a cohesive marketing strategy. So like, how do you structure product launches or a launch strategy to account for both like high profile and smaller feature launches? Do you have a tiering system? And maybe can you talk about how this is influenced actually how you go to market? Morgan, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in. Actually, oh gosh, 4 or 5 years ago, I completely revamped our go-to-market framework at SurveyMonkey, did a lot of research, gathered frameworks from other companies, other people. This is before ShareBird had their whole resource library, which I'll plug, and you can find ours there too. So we do have a tiering framework, and we actually look at it across two elements. So the first is market launch tiers, and the second is customer impact tiers. So our market launch tiers is more how hard do we go with external comms, and the other, of course, customer comms. So because in addition to launching new products and features, we also get involved in pricing changes or planned outages, and that doesn't really require market comms, but more careful customer comms. So at least on the market launch side, we do have tier 1 through 3. Tier 1 being our major features or new products or solutions that typically are going to drive their own revenue and deserve their own spotlight. Tier 2 being sometimes a thematic launch or maybe bundle of a couple related smaller features. Or maybe it's an update to something that warrants external comms because it's really strategic in nature. So for example, we treated a recent update to our Salesforce integration, for example, as a tier 2 launch because it's one of our strategic partnerships. And then tier 3 is usually reserved for bundling into smaller features into maybe our monthly release notes, our quarterly refresh of our What's New page. We have a quarterly What's New webinar. So it's definitely more an at scale effort that we have where we want to talk about all the great stuff that our R&D team is putting out there, but we don't give it its own spotlight. So for all three of those tiers, we do have checklists that we follow, which help shape our launch plans. And again, you can find that in the ShareBird library, but that's really what guides the strategy across channels and what we do depending on that tier.
I love it, and always good to plug whenever you're connecting to someone else's product on the panel.
Yeah.
Chandra and Mike, anything you want to add or you do differently at your companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some similarity there. We think a lot about, we'll say small, medium, large, which is very much kind of the tiering. And there are some very standard things we'll do that are just ongoing that might be worthwhile. Like we always have like at major releases, we think of those launches because launches don't just have to be big things. There's a lot of enhancements that you want to keep educating your customers and your prospects on. So those release webinars, like they're one of our most highly attended webinars. People get super excited about that. So like don't underestimate that. When we think about the big announcements, we also think about how we can get a lot of more bang for the buck, really. And so, like, do we anchor that instead of trying to create momentum all by ourselves? Do we anchor that on something like a big event or an industry event? Like, this is an unveiling. And then you know you're going to have, like, maybe you're going to have analysts there. Maybe there's an opportunity for dinners. Like, then you can, like, be following up and, like, building that momentum at that point in time. So, you know, don't forget what I would call like your bread and butter. Like you should have launch activities around that. And then actually, how are you thinking about timing those big launches so that you can get more momentum? Because I don't know anybody who's kind of saying, oh, my marketing team's just getting bigger and bigger. Like we need to be able to deliver a lot more with fewer people.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than just the fact that I think, tiering systems are amazing and we've done the tiering system thing. I also feel like it's one of those things where, it's the when you don't have the plan for the thing that pops up, how do you fit that in? So I think as you're thinking about a tiering system or a structure, as you're going through your roadmap and your plans, you're planning out your major and minor moments, always have a little bit of space to be like, okay, when this thing happens, when the CEO gets really excited about something new or the product team gets really excited about something new, save a little bit of space or find a place where you can strategically bundle something in. So a little bit of expect the unexpected whenever you have that strategy too.
Can I just one follow up on that? Do you find like as you're communicating tiers to your product partners and your teams, like I don't know, any advice there on how to make sure that that lands well? I know that it's always tough, and you're like, oh, you love this feature, but we're going to make it a tier 3. Like,
Yeah. Surprise, we're not supporting this. No. Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of things I think you can do in order to make that conversation easier. I think having a great relationship and like, there's a little bit of making sure you're aligned around the priorities is always the first piece. I think the second thing I would say is when you are misaligned with your product partner, I would just take it up a level. Like, why are we misaligned? Is it because internally we think this is super interesting, but our customers are not interested in this? Is it something that, we just want to do something around? A lot of the time I actually find from launches, it's less of, a 0-1, we're supporting it, we're not supporting it, but it's actually how are you supporting it? Sending an email is supporting it. Hosting an entire event for it too is also supporting it. So I find it's a little bit more of like figuring out the how and not the whether or not the why.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I find that like just to build on that, like I do sometimes I remember there have been instances in my past where a product manager might get a little heartbroken that their feature isn't going to get supported as a tier 1 or 2 launch. But I think that's where sometimes the customer impact tiers, at least the way we've structured it, helps, because if it's a feature that's not really differentiated, maybe it's a little bit of playing catch up from a market standpoint, but customers have been asking for it and they really want it. We know they're going to be excited about it. Like we can be really hyped up and excited in our comms to customers. And that's still a great way to get that feature out there, get it discoverable, get people adopting it. But you don't have to do the press release. You don't have to do like some of the bigger external splashes. And that tends to kind of, ease the tension.
I love that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And Chandra, this actually, you kind of teed this up well by talking about how marketing teams are not growing at most companies. How do you manage when budget is tight? So like, where do you focus your energy to drive the most impact for a launch when you don't have a lot of money? And especially would love if anyone has a story about creative ways that you have gone to market that didn't cost a lot.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. A couple things. One, I always start and I think about our own channels, and I can think about social, and of course we can do that. And it's fun to do a clever marketing campaign, but we also look at and think about like, what are the authentic voices that we can have and promote on social? So a lot of times our product experts or our product leadership, if they have a following or if they have a good title or a good set of experiences, it's like why they chose to build this? Like, what is the value in telling that heartfelt story of what it is? Like, that goes a long way. And that's something that we are coaching and counseling the product team on how to write, and we're reviewing that with them. But like that's a great way to drive awareness and build launch outside of like what we'd say, like, hey, I'm just doing a marketing post on social. So one, it's like, yes, getting our other evangelists within the company or even within partners and like doing that, like, I'm just going to host a webinar for partners and explain to them. So like really helping them amplify that. It's more voices. And then I will always like, I know, product-led growth versus if you have a sales team. If you have a sales team, like just over-index on sales on BDRs. Like, do not underestimate like the power of like give those BDRs like 10 templates. Now it's super easy with AI. Like, give me 10 templates. You like just have them, remind them, check in with them. Like, you have to keep training and retraining to get that new messaging to stick and to understand the value proposition.
Yeah, I have a kind of fun story from, well, first off, I would say budget. Nobody ever has enough budget. So, and if you do, like, let me know, because that sounds like a very unique situation. So there's never enough to be able to do what you want. Last April, I would just plus one the idea of using own channels and in-product channels. Discord is a social platform that has, a lot of people who use it every day, week, month. So, reaching out to your customers is the product. That is kind of the way you go to market. And last April, for April Fools, we actually built something together with product and design internally that was, if you've played games before, it was like a loot box activation where you go and you click a lot of boxes to launch our avatar decorations. And people would go and they would open up these boxes, 10, 20 of these things. It's like a very manual, repetitive task. And at the end of it, we popped up as you got like a clown decoration, which was like, you actually went through this entire process. We were kind of trolling our own users, and people opened billions of these things. So, I mean, literally billions. It was incredible to me. But part of it is just, thinking about your customer, using your own channels. It didn't take a lot of money. It took, one person spending a little bit of time, but it was a creative way to think of how can you connect with your customer in the product? How do you amplify it on YouTube or on social? And it doesn't have to be a Super Bowl spot.
Yeah, I agree. It's very rare actually that we have dedicated budget for a product launch. So again, like the notes I took down for myself was own channels, own channels, own channels. And so I would echo what everyone's saying. We've got, for example, some of the things I talked about before, like our quarterly what's new webinars and things like that we're already promoting. It's just part of our normal run the business marketing plan. And then thinking about, okay, if you've got like full funnel, like digital advertising live, can you slot in maybe some fresh product messaging in the lower funnel consideration or choice stages of that funnel? We've found success doing that. And then the other thing is like, I love just getting creative. Our most recent launch, actually a couple weeks ago, last week, 2 weeks ago, very recent, we launched some new ways of really quickly integrating survey throughout the survey flow with specific apps, Slack being one of them, Microsoft Teams being one of them, et cetera, and really easy ways of creating alerts when you get certain feedback in. And we did this whole cute little demo video on social where we actually used an example of the hotel staff from the White Lotus and setting an alert when you get feedback that, oh, another murder's happened, or like, how do you alert customer client service and things like that. So it was like a really cute, fun, very, trendy, example to use to showcase the power of the product. And it was one of the posts where we actually got a ton of engagement and reach that we don't usually get for a product post. So just finding fun ways to bring your product to life. It can make, some of the same things go a little bit further.
Oh, these are awesome examples. Authentic voices, amazing. Also a great way to be aligned with your product partners, I would say. Using your own channels. And then I think one theme that came through here, which I just want to double click on because it's near and dear to my heart, is like having fun. And there were some fun ideas here and how that actually can go a long way in connecting your product. So connecting with your product. Thank you. Okay. In the spirit of cross-functional connection, let's talk about the teams and that are involved in product launches and how you set expectations there. So Obviously, we know, I think as product marketers, launches require a lot of people to actually become successful. What's been your approach to defining the roles and responsibilities in a launch and having strong cross-functional alignment? And by the way, and then bonus points if there's any like lessons learned from like misalignment. I think that's always a good way to learn. So who wants to start on this one? I don't know, Mike?
Yeah, I'll start. I have so many painful lessons, so I can always go for the. Yeah, I mean, I actually was thinking about this because, roles and responsibilities, I've done 50,000 times, 10 different companies where you go through the whole process of saying, let's be really clear on who's driving what, done playbooks, done trainings. I think that the reality is that it's actually four parts of making this work. The very first one I think is you have to have the right strategy, which is like people understand the strategy of your launch, why are you building this, why are you launching this. The second part is you have to have the right structure, which is the roles and responsibilities. You need to know who's the driver, who's a passenger. I say that people are in a car, and it's okay that somebody might be in the back seat, but they're still in the car, but there can only be one person with their hands on the wheel. The third piece is you have to have the right process. That's check-ins, that's communication, that's, I would really emphasize the check-in piece because misalignment is normal. It happens all the time. It's actually finding that and then quickly identifying it and then addressing it. That's where it matters. And then the fourth part, honestly, is culture, because you want to have a collaborative culture that people can go and say, hey, this is working, it's not working, because, when the rubber meets the road and people are stressed, I've never successfully seen anybody pull up the Google slide to be like, oh, remember you were supposed to do this thing. It's actually like, are you collaborating? Are you working on the right problem the right way? So it's a lot of pieces. And if any of those parts go wrong or they're missing, I think it's ripe for misalignment.
Agreed. Chandra, Morgan, you want to add anything to that? How you're handling?
Yeah, I'll actually jump in as well, and it will build like off of what you started with, Mike. One, I am a firm believer that you just have to do a kickoff meeting. And you get everybody on a call or in a room, and you're like, hey, this is the goal. These are the dates. These are the roles and responsibilities. And here's the board. Like, here are the actions that we're going to deliver against. So it's a level setting because I think misalignment happens when you aren't all on the same page. The other thing that I would say that is really like, I think I've noticed organizationally and culturally, it's very easy to fall into async now. It is just, oh yeah, no, we got it. The update's in the channel. Oh yeah, okay, I'll follow up. I did it offline. Like, no, like you actually, this is important, and your comms need to be in the project channel, not just in DM. It's okay to do that in a thread. And walking through that board, and you're like, yep, everybody has to put their updates in, and we're not going to go through line by line and check in your work. Like, that's not what this is. This is about problem solving together, and that's the intention. So it's okay to say, yeah, I'm yellow here, or this is red because of these blockers. So let's reserve time to talk through that. And that's a subset of people. And that's a real discipline to do that. But it really just makes sure you're effectively collaborating. And it really is about collaboration.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love how you hit on the discipline around, I think Mike, you mentioned like, make sure you do your check-ins, and then just making sure that you're keeping people, aware of what's going on, not just async, but in meetings. And I've noticed that product marketers, at least at the SurveyMonkey marketing org and the SurveyMonkey marketing org, are probably some of our best project managers, cross-functional project managers. And it's a skill set that I think is taught probably, or not, maybe just learned by necessity because of all the people you have to bring together and drive alignment with. And I feel like for us, because we have such good process and documentation and things like that we do follow, sometimes the biggest misalignment challenge we have isn't about the strategy or the plan or what we're going to do, but it comes when things get delayed. And then we have to go back and we're like, okay, well, is everything delayed? Is a piece of it delayed? Can we still go with some of it? And so you kind of have to go back and like refigure out your plan and scramble a little bit. And I think it's kind of inevitable in some cases, like you're always going to experience that. But I'd say, that like, we're getting better here. And what's helped is actually something, Chandra, that you mentioned earlier, which is we've started to tie some of our bigger launches that we really don't want to drop to some of our other bigger events or go-to-market moments, which kind of like forces the alignment around timing. It's like, well, we're hosting a product keynote in our upcoming customer event, and we got to be ready. So it's got to be demoable, right? So it kind of forces product's hand a little bit. And, if they have to rearrange resourcing to get it done, they get it done, but it creates that rigor and in that forcing function for us.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing because I love, like, Morgan,
Yeah.
what you said is two things. One, I really will say, like, yes, that point of like when you tie it to an event and, yes, we live and breathe by Dreamforce.
Mhm.
That's just like, has to be live
Right.
code. You want a big Dreamforce announcement, it has to be live code. So like it's an incredible forcing function. But the other thing I wanted to go back to was this concept of like, yes, product marketing, and it's a lot also about like project and program management, and that's an underrated skill. I mean, I will own the fact that I believe a lot of my professional success and the value I deliver to the organizations I've been with is because how I bring people together and how I drive towards outcomes. And that is this discipline around being really good programmatic in your comms and bringing people together. And people underestimate it. I know I have to like, I coach a lot of people that are more junior in the organization, and they're like, can I just get like a project manager for this? And I'm like, no. I'm like, project managers are hard to come by. But I'm like, you yourself should know how to do this discipline and to drive this work. That's not something you outsource. So that, I'll just put kind of an extra like finer point on that is why I wanted to bring it up. It's super important.
That point needs just some space for everyone to ruminate on. I completely agree. The power of project management as a product marketer is it is one of the secret sauce to a lot of really good product marketers. Okay, we'll move on a little bit. Maybe we just talked through again. We kind of got a few of the, Mike talked about a few of the missteps and the fails, but I think this is always a fun one. Maybe in your experience, what are some of the most common pitfalls teams fall into during launches? And are there any things that you wish, if you could go back, you might have done differently on maybe one of your big launches or just a memorable launch? Morgan?
I can start. Yeah. So I think this is a little bit of a general statement, or I guess piece of advice for folks. But when I see launches, I wouldn't say fail, but like maybe they don't land as effectively, or, long term, the success isn't there, is when we focus too heavily on the immediate launch moment and we don't think holistically about the ongoing feature discoverability, because next quarter's launch is like coming up, right? You're going to have to switch gears to the next new thing. And you need to make time or incorporate into your plan that those always on methods of driving awareness and usage of those key features, especially the ones that are, are going to possibly lead to stickier customers or upgrades or things like that. Like I firmly believe that your launch plan is not just about that day of. And so a recent example that we ran into, and it was kind of like an oopsies moment for us, was that we didn't have any deep linking available ready for our launch plan. And like the team hadn't, like on the product side, hadn't really thought through that strategy. Granted, we weren't pushing them either. So kind of a double oopsies there. But ideally, if it's something that's like deeper in, and this was again, similar kind of, we have this now new integrations hub, like really great, easy way to connect your survey to other parts of the workflow. But that it's like kind of after you create your survey, after you send your survey, like it's this new step in the process that we've introduced. And yet we weren't able to produce our always on emails to like get you back into that part of the flow. And to me, that's like oh, well, now we have to like wait for this strategy to come to life and go live, and then go back and do some of this like life cycle and email work. when we could have had that as part of our plan from the get-go. And so that's just one thing that it was a recent example and something that we've run into is just, don't just think about the launch day, think about the long term and how you're going to drive people into the product and adopting that new feature.
Yeah. Plus one, I think that's a great point because it's not just the launch moment, it's the pre and the post as well. I think somewhere that I also find things can go wrong on is, and I'll just like say this, it's kind of the flip side of the project management piece. If your strategy sucks, you're gonna have a crappy launch. And like you just gotta say that. If you just have a bad strategy, if you're solving the wrong problem, everything is just gonna not work. So hopefully we catch this somewhere in one of the checkpoints, the brief reviews, but really that is the first place it can go wrong. You're doing a focus to drive more subscribers from your existing customers who are eating, sleeping, and breathing a product all the time, but you want to do a huge outdoor campaign, you're not really thinking about like what is the problem you're trying to solve. The strategy isn't clear. It's misaligned from the business objective. And if you go down that path, you lead a launch, you're going to just see it come back up in the fact that, it's not going to be very successful or somebody's going to call it out. So it sounds so simple, but it starts at the top, have a good strategy, know the problem you're solving.
Yeah, I couldn't echo that more. Mike, I had just made some notes when I saw this question, and it was like just operationally, if you haven't grounded on the value and the positioning and alignment across your stakeholders up front, like then you're just gonna have a bad launch. Or you might just check the box and get things done, but you're not gonna see the impact. And that grounding usually requires a lot of wrangling with a lot of execs and making sure everybody's true to that. And it doesn't mean you can't go back and kind of say, hey, we've learned something new. Does this still hold? But like I loved you used, the framing of like a launch brief. Like, yeah, we're doing a launch brief here. And this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, especially for the big launches. Like super, super important.
I love that. Yes. Without that alignment, it's so hard for anything to be successful. Okay. This has been great, the scripted portion. I think it's time for us to begin to transition to some audience questions, but I see lots of them coming through. So first of all, by the way, just a reminder to everyone listening, please add questions. I think you can also thumbs up questions that you really like, and I'll make sure to try to address those that are getting the most love from the audience. And actually, this is a good one. I'm going to start with a little bit easy one because it's a little bit also a pre-question plus one that I see getting some thumbs up. So the first question I want to answer is, how do you come up with launch goals? Let's talk about measurement. This one's near and dear to my heart. I worked at Meta. It's a place we try to measure everything. How do you know whether a launch was successful or not? What data and processes are you all using?
I can start on this one. Yeah, I think to Chandra's point recently, so I'll take this two ways. One is you want to be clear on the problem you're solving. You want to put that down in writing. You want to put it in a brief. You want to put it in a doc. You want to socialize that. You're going to have one primary goal, and then you're going to have a bunch of secondary goals. But you need to make sure that the tiering stays in process. Sometimes you have guardrail metrics, etc. But the thing on top of that I want to add, actually, that is around a launch, and I say this all the time, is number of fires is a KPI. And that's because, when a launch goes smoothly, people don't realize how smoothly it's gone. You're going to see the performance of it, but I've seen tons of launches where you have to expect the unexpected. We do scenario plans where if the product isn't ready and you're thinning a very, very, very tight rope here, what happens if it's delayed a day, a week, an hour? What do you do in those scenarios? So just saying, hey, this was a smooth launch actually is something that people won't feel necessarily in an organization, but as a marketing organization or as a product marketing team, you can know. You're like, good, not a lot of fires, so that's good.
Such a good metric. More
I know, it's hard to top that. No, yeah, it's interesting because I think in some instances, again, going back to like focusing on the launch day, like I think sometimes we look at some of these vanity metrics like PR impressions or web traffic or like, newsletter click-throughs or whatever it was. And to me, we really try to anchor on more of the longer term success around feature adoption. So usually we're looking at a percentage of users that have tried or using the feature, or maybe a package mix if the feature is attached to a paid plan and you're trying to move the package mix or shift that up. And then if it's maybe a new sales SKU, looking at the attach rate or the impact to AOVs. So I think some of that isn't going to show up in, your week of, your month of, like it's going to take a little longer to see those metrics shift. But I think it's important because otherwise, why are we doing this at all? So, making sure that you're getting to the heart of what you're really trying to move with the new launch.
Yeah, it's such a good topic of discussion because it is really hard to measure the impact of what PMMs do and how launches work. Morgan, I agree. We really try to move beyond just simple activities and kind of saying, I did a bunch of stuff to tracking, what's the ACV impact. I personally like to think what's like the time to get that first revenue in associated, because like clearly if you can do that faster, it means you're resonating and that launch is successful. We look at certain things like if it's around an event or if we're doing things that's a topic, like what's the marketing driven pipe. So thinking about pipe as a, leading indicator, revenue as a lagging indicator. There are even you can get some even really early reads on leading indicators. And you can think about like, hey, if you've actually updated your SEO and your website and you're driving people appropriately with all the CTAs. And this is about thinking very holistically. So yes, we have people going to a CTA page. Yes, this makes sense. What's happened with web traffic when you do that? Did people follow through with social impressions? So like things to just show like you're getting the attention and the awareness and they took a step to go learn something more. It's not a science, but trying to get that right mix so that you're not waiting, whatever it is, a few months just to get some indicator of launch success.
Maybe just a quick build on that as well and just come back around. I think that the other thing I would not every company has the luxury of this, and this is maybe more on the consumer side. Like I know, again, Discord is a consumer-led motion. There are things you can do around incrementality that are also opportunities where you can get a little bit rubber meets the road and a little bit of science where, for example, if you're as a product marketing team, and this is maybe like a PLG type motion, if you do a holdout or you do a 95.5 test and you say, hey, we've tested this creative message, we've launched this product this way, we have this in-product channel that product marketing owns, as a channel, that gives you also a little bit of credibility to be saying with the product team, these are the numbers of this is the thing that's moving. And if we didn't do this, you wouldn't see this impact. So I totally agree. There's a lot of this stuff that's hard to measure in the real world. I think if you can also just push a little bit and try and get one of those like levers in product that you can say to the data science team, that goes a really long way on the performance side.
Yeah, I love that. I think the incrementality side is obviously very hard to get, but incredibly important. Do any of you have an example? I think one, or just maybe a thought on this, how you've used the metrics before? Because I think there's obviously the proving the value. I think the other part of it, right, is have you changed any tactics? Like how have you maybe maybe turned down some dials, turned up some dials, saw some stuff wasn't working. I'm just curious, like using product marketing metrics, that I think that's always a difficult one. Like, how do you use this practically to change the business going forward? Anyone have any thoughts there? Realize that's maybe a bit of a curveball.
I have a thought that comes to mind, and it's tangentially related to product launches. So I might be going off the rail in terms of the topic of this panel for a second. But one of the things that we partner with sales enablement on is sales confidence. And it's a survey-based metric, but we do look at confidence across a lot of different areas in terms of, a corporate pitch or positioning the product or competitive positioning or, different stages of the sales cycle where sales feels, not so confident to very confident. And so sometimes we will uncover, oh man, like we haven't really spent a lot of time on enablement or training or like reinforcing things in a certain area. And when we see sales confidence dip, that's like a good indicator for us that we need to put some more focus there. And we actually actively plan our roadmap around some of the data we get from that. So it can be product related, but it could be also other things in the world of enablement that we choose to focus on.
Very cool. Okay. I will move on. This one's actually a very, very focused question. I'm actually going to ask Chandra. Oh, by the way, I should say, Sonder, thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. This is coming from Emily. Do you have any recommended resources for improving project management skills as a PMM?
That is a great, great question. It's funny. I saw your question pop up and I was like, how did I learn how to do that? There are certain things I think, like if your company follows a methodology, if they do like have a certain kind of style that's like, yes, we have a project manager team, like it's good to draft off of that because that's something that's known and understood in your organization. And I get that that might be something that's more available in a larger or mid-size or a larger organization. The other things I do is I look really closely at like it's easy to find some templates. Like I think you could go in ShareBird and actually even think about like launch templates and like, hey, what's a project plan? Do a little reading. Like I'm thinking about like just what you can do to be scrappy instead of saying sign up for a class, like would be like scrappy of saying like do some reading on like what I'd call like racy or DC models. Like it's just like what are those roles that people have to be as like, okay, who's the approver, who's consulted, who's informed, like those are like there's just a lot out there. And I think you can kind of quickly get some basics on that. And if you're in an organization that's not as used to like working that way, maybe because you're kind of an early stage company and you're moving fast. Like I've worked at early stage companies, so I've been at both ends of the spectrum. And that's a discipline that doesn't always like sit well sometimes. Like, oh, it's a lot of structure. And you're like, hey, this is why I'm doing it. Give me a little grace, like introduce it with that concept. And you're like, hey, this is just to make sure we're all on the same page. So that's where I would start.
I love that actually. Just to plus one on the finding the templates, we've just recently, within the last few months, published all of the templates that our PMO organization, our program management organization uses publicly for the whole company to use on our company wiki. And I can tell, like we've all adopted it. It's been great. And so tap into the folks who are experts in this at your company, and there's probably a way to spread the love. The other thing is something we highly value at SurveyMonkey is feedback. And so as a manager, if I'm, coaching a newer or more junior product marketer through a go-to-market process, I will even like pre-say this before heading into the meeting, like, hey, I'm excited to join. I'm going to hang in the background, but just so you know, I'll take some notes and we can sync up after, and I can relay any feedback I have for you. And I think that like makes it a little less intimidating because they know going into it that like you're on their side, but that also you're there to help them grow and improve, and then share your expertise, notice things and provide that feedback in the moment, and you'll start to see everyone get better around you.
That's great. And again, plus one for ShareBird, checking out the templates and everything we have there. Chandra, I know you have to leave a little early. Did you want to quit? I want to, first of all, thank you so much. I don't know if there final words of wisdom before you go.
You know what? I just thank you all. I'm sorry I have to leave a little bit early, but I love doing this. I am always inspired by the answers and the things that people are sharing. So I encourage people like just go seek out more like what people are providing. I'm learning stuff from my peers on best practices. So like it's really great. So happy to be here with y'all and thank you.
Thank you. Go follow Chandra's page on ShareBird. All right. Okay. We will continue. Morgan and Mike. All right. What strategies work best for generating pre-launch buzz and sustaining momentum post-launch?
I can start. Good question. I mean, I think it depends a lot on the company. It depends a lot on the product. So I think I'll give a very generalized answer. I think that a couple things that are important. I saw somewhere there was a question around internal launch and maintaining momentum. I would say that I actually think it's really important internally for people to feel the buzz and to be excited about a major launch. And I think one way you can do that is just by painting the vision. This is not just one moment, as I think Morgan's mentioned a lot, which is great. It's actually like a bunch of drum beats. You sell it internally, like people need to feel there's an internal part of this that I think is really, really important. I think the second thing I would say is when you think about driving launch and buzz, it is, all customers are not created equally. There's a very, very, very small set of people who drive a disproportionate amount of conversation. They can drive a disproportionate amount of activity or purchases or usage. And finding those people and getting them excited early, this is a very typical like influencer strategy, but I think it goes into this in your customers too. Who are the most vocal customers? Who are the most vocal influencers in the space? Where in media are people going to be talking about your product and your launch? And really just if those folks at the very, very beginning of the curve are excited, you're going to see a lot of trickle down effects because that drives such a disproportionate amount of the conversation. So that's where I would start internally and then with your super early adopters and influencers.
I'm glad you brought up customer involvement. I also own customer marketing. And so it's really nice to have, the team that's working on customer stories and testimonials so close to product marketing. Because one thing that we like to do with our early access programs or our beta programs is to make sure that we're trying to get customer stories early. So first, you're driving buzz internally because you're inviting people to a beta program, and so people are like know that something's coming, that it's something that they're able to test. So we usually try that more on the customer comm side, and then once you launch, if you've got a couple of those stories kind of in the like in your backlog and are working through those, like you can have a little bit more oomph to say your press release or something if you're including a customer quote. And then as those stories continue to come to life, like thinking about that drumbeat, as you mentioned, where you're continuing to, again, bring the product through life through the customer lens, is it just a great way to keep the momentum going. And you can do that through, a lot of your channels, social, email, et cetera. So it's just something that I always try to push on with my teams, is to make sure you've got that arsenal of customer stories to keep telling.
Amazing. Okay, we will continue on. Okay, another budget related question. So the question is, as PMMs, we don't typically own the marketing budget. How do you influence the rest of the marketing team who are hesitant to spend their budgets on smaller launches that won't exactly generate new leads? The last part's maybe a bit of a curveball, but maybe like how do you influence the rest of the organization with regard to the rest of the marketing organization to be kind of, I guess, aligned and on the same page? I know we kind of touched on this, but maybe any other thoughts you may have.
Yeah, I mean, the second part's interesting because I think if it's a smaller launch that won't generate new leads, I don't think I would spend money on it. So I would kind of keep that to owned kind of free or sunk cost kind of channels. So the other thing I'll note, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but so let's say you wanted to influence your paid marketing team who might have, a whole slew of, channels that they're activating throughout the funnel. I would make sure that our go-to-market calendar is on their radar, because what we can do, and now granted, we have become a little bit more agile here because we took all of our paid marketing management in-house. So we aren't beholden to an agency and all of the fees and costs that come with frequent swaps of creative. But we, if we have something that's coming up, and again, we want to slot some of that product messaging or creative that has actual new UI in it and things like that, we get that on the team's radar, and we use the existing kind of always on budget But what we're doing is we're swapping creative, especially lower funnel creative, to include more of the latest and greatest product messaging. And so that's been something that's worked well for us. And you don't need to, be building a business case for budget for a launch. It's more like, okay, like what are our ongoing streams that we've got running, and how do we slot into those?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. I think that was a great answer. Yeah, I think that, not every launch needs paid too, is the other part of it, and that's okay. I know it's amplification, but, if your business goal is to do something that isn't, directly tying revenue or to reach people outside of your existing environment, it's okay to not use paid. So I think it's really just like coming back to like, what's the channel? What's the goal? What are you trying to do? And then does it make sense for there to be a paid spend on this? And if it is, like in what form? It doesn't all have to just be direct response performance. You could do influencers. There's a lot of different levers you have.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously kind of ties back to the original, like the first question we talked about with tiering and a few of those other kind of components around the business goal you're trying to achieve. Okay, this might be our last question. I think this is a fun one. I think this is a question, or always often a challenge I feel like we have as product marketers sometimes. How do you gauge launch readiness? How do you know whether a product is ready for launch? And maybe especially I'd love to know how you think about the dynamics often between a product organization, maybe them thinking it's ready, you're not sure. Or yeah, talk to me a little about launch readiness and how you think about it.
When the CEO says it's ready, it's ready. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't think I have a hard and fast rule around launch readiness. Again, as we were launching a consumer product, typically it's not this like 0 or 1 moment where it's like there's nothing and then there's something. You do a much more of a stage rollout. Actually, one time when we didn't do this was actually, I'm dating myself a little bit, but was when Uber launched tipping. That was one of the only times that we didn't do go from like a very small percentage of people to get the product to actually, roll it up, because you knew it was the kind of product that you wouldn't really be rolling back necessarily. It was like a principled roll decision, not necessarily like one that's gonna, shift the business dramatically. So I think it's a lot more of a stage rollout. I do think there's a qualitative and a quantitative aspect to this. Like what is good enough? What is an MVP? Very hard to know. But I think as product marketers, you can also wear the customer hat and be like, this just isn't good enough. Like, or, hey, actually, I think this is good enough, but we're going to need these 3 things next. And, that's ultimately your job and your role in the organization too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was actually interesting. I caught one of Chandra's something she said earlier, which was related to Dreamforce. And it's like, if it's not live code, it's not getting launched at Dreamforce. So it's like, one thing that we talk about internally at SurveyMonkey is that the release date is not the launch date. And so that's something that, we try to make them close, but in some instances, right, like we are, to Mike's point, launching under experiment or limited availability. And in some cases, we can get really quick results. We know that it's positively impacting our metrics, and we're like, okay, we're good to go. Other times, and actually we have something right now that's been in limited availability since last year, and it's still there. And it's a newer kind of AI-based thematic analysis for open-ended responses. And people are really excited about this feature. They want it bad. However, like our first MVP for this wasn't quite there, and the feedback we were getting from customers who were in like the earlier exposure were saying like, talking about it being finicky and it not working and it not being good enough for what they were expecting, and so we've kind of like rethought that feature a little bit and have held back any sort of public launch. Because the other thing is you don't want to put something out there in the market that's not going to like, hit the mark. And so there are instances where, we've held stuff back. And again, it goes back to kind of the alignment thing that we were talking about earlier. And so it's just like that frequent communication. It's keeping, staying really close to your product partner and you really understanding together when something's going to be ready for launch, and again remembering that the release date is not the launch date and don't have to be the same at the same time. So just keeping that in mind.
That's such a good place to end. Thank you so much, Morgan, Mike, Chandra. This was a lot of fun for me. I learned a lot. So I really appreciate it.